welcome to another exciting episode of Mindset Mastery Moments. Today we have a distinguished guest in studio who has mastered the art of creating wealth and leading successful companies. I am talking about a phenomenal individual who is an executive, entrepreneur, and author of a highly acclaimed book that's called The Value Equation. I am talking about a guest who has led 3 marketing real estate investment companies public and helped provide over $20 billion in growth capital to businesses across the USA. Today, we'll be diving into his unique V formula for creating wealth and the secrets behind building a thriving business. This is an episode you won't want to miss. So grab your favorite beverage, or if you're driving, turn up the volume, and let's go into an episode that we are calling the V formula. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome to Mindset Mastery Moments our guest today, Mr. Christopher Volk. Christopher, come on into the studio. We're excited to meet you.
Well, good afternoon, Alisa. It's just fabulous to be here and good to see you, and thanks for inviting me.
You as well, Christopher. Christopher, I want to tell our listeners and viewers around the world a little bit more about you. Christopher Volk is a recognized business model expert and the author, as I said earlier, of The Value Equation, a business guide to wealth creation for entrepreneurs, leaders, and investors. His V formula, commonly called, helps entrepreneurs determine their company's pre-tax return on equity, wealth creation potential, and all the good, juicy stuff. Chris has a remarkable track record of having led and co-founded companies that went public on New York Stock Exchange and attracted prominent investors like Berkshire Hathaway. We have got a phenomenal wealth of information in the body and the physical form of Mr. Christopher Volk. And so today, entrepreneurs, business leaders, tune in because you are about to get into the value equation. Christopher, you tell us who you are in your own words and what is the V formula all about?
And thanks for that really gracious introduction. I've just been a business guy my whole career, and I started off in banking and did that for about 6 years. And one of my customers was out in Arizona, so moved from Atlanta, Georgia, to Phoenix in 1986, and began to work with a company that was a great company that provided real estate capital for middle market companies. And what we would do is we just go out and buy the real estate and rent it to people. So we had all these chain restaurant operators, fast food guys that would rent real estate from us. And then we would take the rents and we would pay dividends to all of our investors. So it was basically a kind of a dividend income vehicle for people. And it did well. And one year I suggested that we just take our companies that we'd created and combine them all and list them on the New York Stock Exchange. And so we did that, and I became president and ran it. And then, after we sold that company to General Electric, we decided to start another one. So we did kind of the same thing, just a little bit different, but we did the sort of same thing. And all the time I'm doing this, I'm also writing articles on business and stuff, and I'm coming up with ideas like the value equation and the V formula and stuff. And we grew the second company and took that public on the New York and sold it. And then later on, I would do a third company. And when you have a chance to do companies over and over again, and in our case, the companies were fairly similar, I just got better at it. So the last company was the best of the lot, and I grew that to about $10 billion in assets by the time I left, and had Berkshire Hathaway as a shareholder, and I left to be able to do things like this, to be able to spend time with you and your audience, and to write a book, and to hopefully make a difference in people's lives if they're thinking about how to run a company or how is wealth created. I could do that, and the value equation, or the V formula, is part of that. And the V formula is basically just a super simple formula, dumbed down to take a company into 6 basic components, and you end up calculating what's called a current return on equity for investors. And so it's basically an idea of what does it take, what levers you have if you're leading a company, what kind of levers can you pull to sort of make that company better, and And if you can make the company have a better business model, then you can create a lot of wealth, which is great for you if you're the owner of the business, but it's also great for your employees who get to go along for the ride and hopefully get some piece of the business as well. It's great for your customers. I mean, it's just great all around. So the better the business is, the better it is. So, and I'm a fervent believer that businesses are fundamentally virtuous in the sense that they got to help everybody. I mean, you can't just be in it for yourself. You got to be in it for everybody that's a stakeholder, your customers, your suppliers, your employees. And if you can do all that stuff, then you can really make a positive difference. And that's what's so gratifying about having started businesses and running.
I absolutely love what you just said. I mean, I'm very, very fascinated by your work and your journey and what you've been able to do. But the biggest part for me is the takeaway you give at the end is you discovered this formula and you've created wealth for yourself and helped, it's pretty sure, thousands of people create wealth for themselves and businesses just really do well. But what you said was so important, and that's a mindset thing. We're going to talk, of course, on Mindset Mastery, we're going to talk. Your mindset and your approach is what I would love to see transcend. This is why I believe in your formula and your message at this time in your journey is that it must be for the good of all, right? It must be good for the good of all. And I'm just summarizing what you said. And I hope that our viewers and listeners are picking up what you just put down, that your business becomes more successful. And we're going to talk about that because we had this conversation before that when you want to generate wealth, you got to think bigger than yourself. So just you guys hold on to that for a minute while I do some deep diving, because y'all know I get all up in the my guest business a little bit. So take us back a little bit to a younger version of Christopher Volk. And what was his kind of mindset? And was there a way of how you thought and you were being in your life that may have been like a pivotal moment where you made a shift that brought you into this level of thinking and success creating space, I would say?
Well, I mean, I think it's very important for everybody to, good leaders tend to always be very curious people. I mean, and they're reading all the time. They're trying to think, how can I do this better? And early on, I was working at this bank. I'm going to night school and taking classes, and I'm trying to figure out what makes good businesses and what makes the best businesses the best businesses. Right. And learning that not all businesses are created equal. I mean, they are just different. You learn that there are components to these business models where you can make your returns elevated, which can make your business worth more if you're thoughtful about it. And so these are the kinds of things that I started to figure out when I was at the bank, and I would write some articles from time to time. And then by the time I got to Arizona, I had, eventually, was dissecting our business model and really trying to understand it. And over the years, I just got much better at it. I would say that understanding the model, if you're trying to sell Berkshire Hathaway stock, these are people that really understand how wealth is created. And so being able to have something like the value equation was instrumental in getting investors like that. And in fact, we would start to use it in our public disclosure about where the returns were coming from and how we were operating the business, and how we did it relative to other companies. And so, today it's sort of second nature to me, but it actually took a while to think through this.
Yes. Obviously. And so let's dive into the value equation a little bit here. And we're definitely going to unravel it because honestly, everyone, this is what this conversation is all about. We want to learn from thought leaders like Mr. Volk how we are to think, and who does not want to create wealth. I haven't met anyone yet. Now, there are different levels of wealth. And let me tell you, he educated me on some concepts when we met a couple months ago. And it was just like, okay, well, how did I not know this? And I am working on generating millions in my pathway so I can create more impact around the world. So Chris, let me ask you this. When it comes to your V formula, for example, how do you use the V formula to help a company achieve significant growth? And first of all, let me just back it up a little bit. What is the V formula and what are the main principles inside of this formula?
Okay, so let's start off with this thought process. And you're talking about wealth creation.
Yes.
So there are no end to the books that have been written on how to get rich.
Oh, yeah. I've read quite a few of them.
Yeah. I mean, so you can go through Rich Dad, Poor Dad and a whole list of books. And they're all great. Think and Grow Rich, they're all great. And the universal thing they'll tell you is that you should control your spending, not have a lot of debt, make your money work for you, constantly save money and invest it into stocks, hopefully, or whatever, so you can grow your wealth over time. And if you're setting aside $300 a month or something like that, that you can do this over your career and you'll end up with, being a millionaire. And all that's true. But what they don't tell you is that the richest people in America and the world didn't just do that. They owned a business, or they owned stock in a business. I mean, think about being able to save money and you're putting away your $300 a month and you're saving money. But let's say you're working for a company and that company is also giving you stock in the company. So now you're becoming a stockholder. So now you basically have a two-fisted way of saving money. You're putting the $300 on one fist, and then you got, this other fist where you now own stock in this business that the owners are giving you some stock in the business. Or better yet, let's say you're a founder of a company. And then, of course, you can own a huge piece of the equity and as being a founder of the business. Right. And so as you go to the Forbes 400, you get top of the wealth spectrum, without exception, every single one of the members of that group made their money owning a business. And it's because you simply can't save enough money. You can't sock enough money away from income to do this. I mean, you have to create a business. Now, how do they do that? Well, they have to have businesses that have really good business models. And so this is where business models matter, because most companies that ever get created are never really worth much more than they cost. So think about that. You have you own a Subway franchise, and you buy it for a certain amount of money, and then you sell it for a certain amount of money, and very oftentimes it's the same amount of money. I mean, you're not really making any money flipping the business. What you are making money, by the way, is working for yourself. So there's advantage to that. And if you've paid down debt, you've built up equity in the business. Okay, right. So that's good. But when you flip it, oftentimes you're not able to actually make a profit.
That's right.
And so the people who find a way to make the greatest amount of wealth are able to have businesses worth much more than what they cost to create. And so the question is, well, how do you do that?
Exactly.
It all comes down to business models. And because what you're trying to do is you're trying to produce a return for the owners of the business that's more than what they would otherwise expect. So if you had an investor, for example, let's say you have an investor who's they're buying stocks and they think 10% or 9% or 8% is a good return. But let's say you create a business and it can produce a 30% rate of return. Well, then, you might be able to flip it to that same investor and you might make 3 times your money. I mean, you're making 30% and they're happy with 10, and this is how businesses do it. And so without going through the whole value equation and getting into math, but by the way, for your audience there, I got news for you. If you're going to lead a business and want to start a business, there is some math. The good news is it's all middle school math, ladies and gentlemen. It's just middle school math. So you don't have to be sitting there being a college math professor to do this or a huge math whiz. So the value equation is all middle school math. But it gets to 3 efficiencies that you want to focus on, and there are 2 variables associated with each efficiency. But I'll tell you what the efficiencies are. The first one is operating efficiency. So when a business has good, efficient operations, it's great. So that's like keeping your costs low, keeping your price points high, keeping your margins fat. Anything you can do, that's called operating efficiency. And there are 2 variables in the equation that just deal with that. And the second is what I call asset efficiency. And this is basically running a business with the fewest assets you can. Like, don't spend more than you need to. Like, you and I were talking, Alisa, before this call about a company that we knew in common.
Yes.
Where the company has spent an awful lot of money on their real estate locations. They built monuments to real estate, and the result of it was that the business couldn't support the cost of this real estate. And so, but you can do this with other things too. You can build lots of inventory, for example. Companies carry too much inventory. Companies can have too many accounts receivable. They give their customers too many terms. So what you want to do is have the leanest assets, bunch of assets you could possibly do. Because why? Because those assets have to be funded with either borrowings or other people's money, and they got to be funded with equity, and the equity is what you're really focusing on, because you want to generate the highest return on that equity as you can. And if you have less assets, then you need less equity. And if you need less equity and your operating efficiency is still the same, then your return's just that much higher on the equity, right? And so, so
that
asset efficiency
so simple when you say it.
So asset efficiency. And then the last one is capital efficiency, which is how do you fund this thing? Like, where do I get the money from to start it? And that's sort of having a mix between money that I borrow, or maybe in the case of, you might rent some stuff. So like a lot of people rent equipment or something like that, which is sort of the same thing as borrowing money. So you could, so I just call it, just to be simple, I just call it OPM, other people's money. I mean, so
other people's money,
using OPM out there. And then you're also having equity, and the equity could be yours, or it could be what we call OPM equity, where you're getting friends and family or other people, and you're doing you're doing a GoFundMe or something like that, but you're having other people's equity out there that you have to generate a return for. And so in the companies I was running and starting, I was using a lot of other people's equity. I mean, I was raising, when you're raising money from Berkshire Hathaway, or you're raising money from other people, you're using their equity to make an investment, and they're expecting a return on it. And so my goal was to make a return that was higher than what that equity was going to cost. And so in the case of our company, we were able to be worth something like 40% more than the real estate cost us, right? So that meant that, or 40% more than the equity cost us. So we had this real estate investment company that was worth 40% more than we paid for it. So we created that. That 40%, by the way, is value you create from thin air.
Right.
So if you have a balance sheet, or so the value in the company when I left was somewhere in the neighborhood of $9 to $10 billion.
Wow.
From an equity perspective. And just so the audience doesn't think that I own that much of it. I mean, I own a very, very, very tiny, small piece of this. But so the company was worth 9 or 10 billion. If it's worth 40% more than you created, and then cost, and then we created 3 to 4 billion out of thin air, right? I mean, we created extra wealth for people, and that's what you're trying to do, and that's what companies are trying to do by having good business models, and you're constantly working on this stuff.
Absolutely. And so I know a lot of our listeners and viewers are thinking at this time, like, that might be why I didn't do so well with that last one. How do most successful companies design using this business model? How does it really allow them, if they're not using the right business model, to thrive or fail? Like, I feel like you just gave us the secret sauce of successful business models, but what are those common practices that are commonly used in many people's journey in growing a business, what is as from an entrepreneur perspective, or growing a larger company? What are some of those things that limit them and cause them not to thrive, and causes more likely a failure, so to speak?
Well, I mean, most people, all businesses solve problems. I mean, one of the things that businesses do, they're providing a solution for something, and the solution to something could be simple. I mean, it could be, where do I go have lunch? So you're making a sandwich for someone, or the solution could be, how am I putting a rocket into outer space and launching it? I mean, so the solutions just vary, right? And so all businesses are there to solve a problem, and the people starting them kind of know the problem they're trying to solve, and they know the customers they're trying to go after, and so then oftentimes they don't really think through the business model that they should have. I mean, up front, so they know they want to solve the problem, but then the question is, how do you design the business to solve the problem the best way?
Yes.
And so, for example, the last company I led ran twice as much. We had twice as many assets with half the people. I mean, I just got better at how to do this. I mean, over time, and how to make a more efficient business model. I find that for example, one of the components to the business model is what I call business investment, which is, what does a business cost to make? I mean, you're sitting there, you're an entrepreneur, you're starting a company. What does a business cost to make? And obviously, if you may have to have equipment, you could have, you might have to have inventory, you might have to have some real estate. You're going to have some extra cash sitting on the sheet. I mean, sitting on your balance sheet. You want to keep some extra cash, because when companies go out of business, they don't go out of business because they lose money. They go out of business because they run out of money. they run out of cash.
Right.
So you want to have extra cash, and this all becomes kind of a business investment. You want to have, let's say you sell products and you give your customers terms. So that's a 60-day term to pay. Well, in that case, what happens is you gave them 60 days, and what you did was you had a product. The product could have been, it could have been a can of soda, a can of water, a bottle of water.
Right.
You gave the water to somebody, and then you exchanged that water for a note receivable, basically a loan. So you don't have cash yet. You have to wait 60 days for the cash. So a lot of times I find that people up front, some of the biggest mistakes that they make are that they haven't really come to grips with what the business investment has to be, so in the case of an account receivable, you now have to carry that for 60 days. You got to have enough room on your balance sheet to do that. And you have to fund it. You got to figure out, how am I going to finance all this stuff? And so you got to go out and raise money from equity, and you got to raise money from other people's money. I mean, borrowings, leases, and make sure, by the way, you have margin for error. I mean, raise more than what you think you need.
Margin for error. Yes. Oh, I love that. I remember when I was helping when I first came to the USA, I was helping a group start a preschool program, and they had a budget, and I was laughing. And I was like, when I did the budget, the way a budget should be done, and created margin for error and staffing and all the things, and then they missed so many things. So they thought they had more than enough money to get started with this business. And then here I come. And of course, I still have to study some of American business laws and things, but at least I know how to do a startup budget, because it's so different from what, if you're not in a business frame of mind. This is why I think entrepreneurs should do themselves the favor of going to a college campus and taking a business course, or getting online in some of these fast track programs where you're studying and learning from entrepreneurs such as yourself, because there's so much you don't know. And I believe when I look at, even in my practice as an entrepreneur, business models is something I hadn't considered until later on, and I'm still figuring out that for myself. And I'm pretty sure the value equation is going to help me when I'm finished reading it. But the question I have for you is, when it comes to entrepreneurs, right? None of us get into business to be halfway successful. There's a level of wealth building that we want. Most of us are, I say, the crazies that want to create massive generation wealth where we make at least $1 million. We want to be in that multi-million-dollar space. What does it take for an entrepreneur to build generational wealth and truly join the ranks of being a multi-millionaire? Because you and I talked about that a couple months ago, and that was like, first of all, what is a multi-millionaire, and what is considered to be in the top whatever percent? And if you could just tap on that a little bit, but what does it take for them to truly get into generational wealth making and join the ranks? Of course, this model you're providing in the value equation, but what else?
Well, I think that that's a good question. And I always oftentimes when I'm talking to college students or graduate students, I kind of will ask them, what do you think a success is? I mean, define financial success for me.
Right.
You're starting your careers today. How much money do you think you have to make, before you're going to think, okay, I'm a financial success. And what I find when I ask this question is that people have unreasonable views about what true wealth is. And part of it's because of the social media environment that we live in, the Instagram environment that we live in, where people are looking at it and they're thinking, well, this guy owns an island, he's really wealthy, or
rich,
this person has a couple of jets, he's really rich, and so I want to put this in perspective. So about 12% of Americans are worth $1 million or more, and that includes houses too, by the way. So it's not just investment. So that's 12%. If you get down to 2 million, the number starts dropping in half. So it gets to be about 6% are worth $2 million, because saving $1 million is totally feasible for a lot of people. Getting to 2, a lot harder, and if you start doing the math on it and figuring out how much you got to save, you sort of figure out why this is. By the time you get to $10 million, now you're kind of getting towards the 1%. 10, 11 million bucks is sort of the top 1% of Americans have 11 million bucks or more. And just to give an idea, like at 11 million bucks, you can't afford a private airplane. You can't. So which means that when you see guys having private airplanes, these are not just 1% people. These are way higher than that. Okay. To get to 50 million bucks, now you're at the upper 1/10 of 1%. So now the 1/10 of 1%, which means that the billionaires are like 1,000 plus billionaires in the United States, 1,500 billionaires. That's buried in this 1/10 of 1%. Those guys are at the very top of this. So how are you worth 5 million? How do you get to be worth 5 million bucks? Well, there are two ways. One is you have like a really high paying job. You're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're a high paid professional.
Yeah.
You can afford to save a lot of money. That might be able to help you save 5 million bucks or better. Same thing might go for 10 million. You might be able to do that. But what you find is that as you get to 5 or 10 million bucks, more and more people start making their money from business. And so you're starting off where, at the low level, a lot of people are saving money. But as you get into 5 million, 10 million, the percentage of business wealth is much higher. It just grows and grows and grows. By the time you get to 50, pretty much all the people who've ever made $50 million made their money in business. And that's why business is so important. And there have been lots of books written on how to get rich, but there have been no books written on how businesses get rich. So the value equation is probably the first book on how businesses get rich. And I thought I would do that because that is how the richest people get rich.
Get rich. Absolutely. And so again, and don't get me wrong, and I know you're not wrong about it, because again, that's why we do have Mindset Mastery Moments. But even as I think about Mindset Mastery, I did not just wanted to get you to shift to your mindset and your belief systems. I wanted to give you something that was actionable. And that's why when I got your information and realized what you had done, what you were talking about, what you've written, and I would say you're on a crusade in this chapter of your life, is giving people the tools. Because shifting your mindset without actionable steps, you can still be a happy-go-lucky, clearer-headed person, but never really walk in the point of making millions. And let's face it, money is a universal currency that is used to make change. And so even while, there's a part of, a lot of people, when I do my archetypes, I always come up to be Mother Teresa, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., I rank with them, which a lot of people would see Mother Teresa and be like, well, she was a woman that was benevolent, but she could not be as impactful as she was without what you call OPM, other people's money, right? So can you talk, before we go to commercial here, can you talk just a little bit of the importance of the role of OPM in growing your company? I know you touched on it earlier, but if you can just give us 3 takeaways that we want to think about when we're thinking about using OPM in our business practices as entrepreneurs or even as a corporation.
Right. So, and this all depends on what kind of business you're trying to get into. In my case, I was doing businesses that invested in real estate, and as anybody knows, real estate's expensive. I mean, it costs a lot of money. I mean, and so if I want to own 100 properties, 100 commercial pieces of real estate, I can't fund it myself. I mean, I can't begin to think about funding myself. I have to go out and raise the money to get it done. So all the business I ever started, I was raising money, and one of the things that's so great about this country is that if you have a really good idea and you have a business model that works and a business plan that works, and if you have a great leadership team of people that you work with, those are rare. And what you find in this country is there are a lot of people that would love to finance companies like that, that would back you. And there's more money out there to back people than there are the people that need the money.
Yes.
And so the money is all green. It's the same money. There are a lot of equity firms that would make the investment, but there are not so many good management teams and not so many good ideas and not so many good business models out there. So if you can create some of this stuff, you can build something. And so, the last company I started, my total investment to start it personally was something on the order of $15,000. And that was just basically paying for plane tickets, paying for, printing of all of our presentations, paying for hotel rooms, and then I went out and raised the money. And when I raised the money, then I did buy some equity, and I paid some cash to be an equity holder along with everybody else, and then we were off to the races. And so with a $15,000 investment, ultimately I was able to grow a company into a $10 billion balance sheet, and using other people's money all the way.
Right. Wow. That is phenomenal. So he knows his stuff. You got to get the book. Join me in finishing it. I'm actually going to charge my entrepreneurial friends in my circle to read the book, because the how to get it done and putting in models in place that really using principles that work and has worked over and over for someone as great as you. Last question before we go to commercial. I had to do a follow-up on this. What are some of the common risks you've seen in business growth, and how can leaders truly navigate those risks? I'm curious, because I know there has to be plenty. You can pick 1 or 2 or as many as you feel like sharing with us today. What are some of those risks that, business that hampers business growth, and how can leaders navigate them?
Well, I think it starts with, if you're a leader in a business, you have to know what your core competencies are. So a core competency is, what am I good at? And it's kind of like trying to think through business models and dumb them down to 6 variables. I mean, you say, I'm good at this, I'm good at this, I'm good at this, but that's not the issue. The question is, in your business, what are the things that you really need to be good at? And then if you don't need to really be good at it, you can outsource the other stuff you don't need to be good at. What do your customers think you provide? And you want to limit your activity to just those core competencies, and to think about, this is what I know how to do. The rest of the stuff is a commodity. I can buy that, but my moat, the thing that makes my business, protected from competition, the thing that makes my business relevant is these competencies, this ability to do these, 3 or 4 or 5 things. And I find that sometimes companies never think about their competencies. They try to be good at too many things. They don't narrow it down. So if you get what's called scope creep, you basically start increasing what you think you can do. And, and when you do that, you have fewer and fewer staff. You do it badly. Your results are going to suffer. So that's an issue. If you grow too fast, hiring labor is always an issue. When you talk about the growth piece of it, I've seen people, trying to grow by acquiring other companies and find that they just they don't know how to acquire companies. It's not a core competency. So it's not being distracted by shiny objects, understanding what the things are that you're really good at, and trying to stay within yourself. And I think that that is probably the safest way to be avoiding landmines.
Yep, those landmines, they were there, but if you plan that path and you know how to balance it, you will probably escape most of them, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. We'll be right back with Mr. Christopher Volk. Ladies and gentlemen, we're so happy that you're with us still. Hasn't this been a phenomenal episode? So much learning and growth for business developers, entrepreneurs, and alike business leaders. We are digging in. And again, I can't wait. I don't have my physical copy. I got an e-copy of The Value Equation by Mr. Volk, but this is a phenomenal tool. And there's phenomenal books, and then there are tools. And so you want to have this in your toolbox. If you've been reading Think and Grow Rich or Rich Dad Poor Dad, which we, of course, say are great books, I would say this will be the companion that will complete you in full circle to put those into practice, the how-to. And now we get to have some fun with Mr. Christopher Volk as we play Flip the Script with him. And so, Chris, as we love to call you, can you share a time with us when you had to flip the script about something that was major in your life, your career, or your business? And what was that? And what did you do?
Well, I mean, as I said earlier, I started my career in banking, and I think when you take your first career, this is about it's a personal exploration journey. I mean, you're taking your first job. You're trying to see, what am I good at? What do I like to do? What am I interested in? And I decided after 6 years of being in banking that I had learned quite a bit, but I wanted to do something different. And there were two things that were driving this. One is that banks tend to be big companies, and I decided I would probably work better in a small company. I mean, sometimes your audience might relate to this. Being in a big company, just a different dynamic. I mean,
it is.
I wasn't sure I was going to be the political guy that was going to rise to the top of a big company. And then my second thing was I decided I liked finance. So I ended up leaving the bank to work for a customer that I knew well, and they were in the financial services space. So they were providing capital to people. That was my competency. So, you're making this shift at one point. If you're going from your first job or an early career move, and that early career move might have lots of places you can go to, and then at some point you start to specialize, and you say, I'm going to go into this piece, and so I started to specialize. And I think when you do that, you're making a quantum jump. In my case, I moved from Atlanta to Phoenix, Arizona, where my wife and I didn't know anybody, and then made a success of it, building 3 companies over the next 35 years. And so the choice ended up being good.
It did. And what kind of mindset do you think you've maintained to go from that entry-level professional and into building 3 multi-million-dollar companies and really being a trailblazer and helping others create multi-billion-dollar companies? What kind of mindset would you say was maintained throughout your life's journey thus far?
Well, I always think that people, as they're starting their careers, have several things they got to really think about. They got to figure out what they're good at, because that's so important. Because if you can figure out things you're good at, then you can start to solve problems. And if you can solve problems for other people, now you're getting into a space where you're creating value for people, you're needed, all those things that are just good. I mean, they make you feel good about coming to work. But also they could be the seeds for creating a business, because businesses solve problems,
Yes.
The second thing is that I think people have to decide early on, do they want to be a leader or not? There are all kinds of leaders. You can lead a department, you can lead a division, you can lead a whole company, and the question is, what kind, do you want to be a leader? How high up do you want to go? And the reason you got to think about this is because then you got to prepare for it. I mean, you have to sit there, okay, what do I need to know to get there? What kind of things do I have to do to be able to just be qualified? And by the way, all business leaders, there's almost no training for being a business leader in a broad sense, because all business leaders end up doing things they never have done before, and they're doing them for the first time. But there is an ability for business leaders to be trained on how to solve problems, how to think out of the box, how to think through a situation. And that's the kind of stuff you need to learn, and you're thinking about it. So I was going to night school. I was doing what it took to be able to train myself to have the potential to rise to levels of leadership. And then I just worked, and I think that you have to make these decisions early on. And then as you're working in your job, you have to exhibit leadership. I mean, you have to come up with solutions. You have to go beyond whatever they tell you to do. I mean, they might give you a job, and you're going to sit there and go beyond that and go into the boss and say, "Oh, I have a solution for this or this." And because if you could do that, those are the people that end up rising into senior leadership. And they do it on their own. Nobody asks them to do it. And I always think that one of my sayings about this stuff is that you either make things happen or things will happen to you, and I think that people who rise to leadership made it happen, almost invariably. It's rare that they didn't make it happen. And if you don't make things happen, then you're letting other people do things to you. So you're basically losing control of your life.
That's it. So I definitely heard a lot about the growth mindset. You're saying a growth mindset to evolve and rise, do whatever necessary to rise to whatever is presented to you in the present moment and for your next chapter, or what it is that you say you want. And everyone knows we talk about the growth mindset a lot on here. And then I have these mindsets I made up, and that's why I would call me mindset disruptor, is the doer's mindset. The doer's mindset is strategic and ever evolving. And they never say, "Oh my God, I can't do that. This is too hard." It's how can I? The how can I mindset. I love it. Love it. What is success for you?
Well, I mean, I think broadly speaking, success is kind of a mission accomplished mindset. Success is contentment. Success is holistic. So it's not just about finance. It's about life choices. It's about your family life. It's your career, your charitable work. So it's all that. And then financial success is just contentment with your ability to live within your means, right? I mean, so my personal view of rich people is that rich people are those people who have earned some money, saved some money, made their money work for them, and they're able to be content with what that money does for them, and they're happy with that, and they can live within those means. Then you're rich. You're rich.
Exactly. So if you just have $1,000 in your savings account and you have that mindset that Christopher described, you're more than likely very successful. And now you can take that from there. If you still want millions, go for it. Get the model. Christopher, how do you maintain resilience, focus in the face of adversity? Because we're learning from you in all ends today. Chris, the person and the business leader. How do you maintain resilience and focus in the face of adversity?
I think that I've always created a plan and tried to stick with it, and I've tried never to doubt myself in terms of the plans. And I've taken plenty of advice, by the way. I mean, but I think it's just important to kind of do what you know is right to do. Oftentimes, I mean, it's interesting, when you're running a public company, there would be times when our stock would be trading really high, and I'd have investors or analysts come up to me and say, your stock's really high. Why don't you go and invest in this or that? And I would say, because by the way, when company stocks are high, it's almost like the market telling the leaders of that company, it's sort of saying buy anything and buy a lot of it.
Right.
It's like you have permission, and I would just say no. This is our mission. Our mission is within these walls. We're going to do this, and we're not going to deviate from that. For example, I liked owning real estate that was leased to middle market companies, right? People that maybe you never heard of, and people that weren't oftentimes public companies. Smaller middle market business. I just love those businesses. These are where all the jobs get created in America, and I just love financing those kinds of companies and helping make those people wealthy, in the process of doing this. And so people would say, why don't your stock's so good, why don't you go buy some CVS drugstores, or why don't you go buy a Home Depot? You can afford to do that.
Right.
And I would say, well, they don't need my money, and I don't even like the return. I don't like the returns of it. I just think the returns are lousy. So why would I do that? And so I think that you just have to have that focus and that vision, and not be listening to a lot of the extraneous noise that comes at you. And likewise, when your stock is trading badly, if I go to 2017, our stock was trading very badly. I had been talking to Berkshire Hathaway for a long time, and so when our stock was trading badly, Berkshire Hathaway noticed it, and they went in and they asked if they could buy 10% of the company, and they did. And so when that happened, then our stock traded better because now we had Berkshire Hathaway, which was like a good housekeeping seal of approval, owning 10% of our company, and all of a sudden our stock did really well. So if you had owned our stock in 2017, you would have been unhappy with me from January through June, and then after June you would have been like super happy, and then by the end of the year you were good. So, but we didn't change what we did. We stuck to it, and then one of the best shareholders in the world saw that we were trading at a cheap price, and they came in. So this is why it's so important to kind of know who you are, know exactly what you do, and stick to it.
Yes. Oh, that was so valuable. Last question in this segment. What's your next big thing, and what mindset is required for you to achieve that big goal?
Well, the next big thing is basically what I left my career to do, which is to help understand, help other people to understand the power of business, to create good and to create wealth. And so that's what we're doing here today. And at the same time, I just really wanted to help others, not just to seek a job, but to seek a path, And so think about what they're doing, because it's about finding that path that's so important. So in a lot of respects, this is kind of the biggest thing I've ever done. It has a chance to help many more lives than what I've done. And I'm just groping with how to make that happen and be good at it. But I really appreciate you taking the time and introducing me to your audience, and thank you.
Yeah, you absolutely, we learned so much from you. You just took us on a life and career and business all in one episode. And I love when that happens, and it happens so succinctly. So Christopher, we get for the next segment, it's called Mindset Bites to Go, where I just step away from the microphone and the camera, give you about 90 to 120 seconds. It's a whole lot, right? I love those big numbers, to share key lessons and takeaway that you want our audience to know based on your experiences, what your message and what your vision and purpose is right now. Just feel free and take it away. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take myself off camera, and it's all you. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay. Well, Alisa, I'll do my best. I think that if you're out there listening, you're thinking about what do I want to do, or how am I going to make $1 million, or how can I start a business? I think the place you start off with is, what am I good at? And I think that is so hard for people to figure out what they're good at, but really work at it. Try to figure out what your core competencies and your core skills are, because if you can do that, then you can build a career around this. And I find that when people talk about finding their passions, one of the things about passion is that almost everyone is passionate about helping other people. Almost everyone is passionate about making a difference. And you can do a lot of this if you take the things that you're really good at and harness them, because then you become an expert. And so what I've done a lot in my career is try to harness the things I'm good at, become an expert. Wasn't good at a lot of things. So as a leader, you're getting other people to really help you on the things that you're not good at. And which gets you to the second point, which is to be self-aware. And the best leaders are pretty self-aware. They know what they're good at, what they're not good at. They're willing to take criticism. They surround themselves with people that make up for their shortcomings. And by being self-aware, you also increase your odds of rising to leadership, I think, because you're going to be responsive to other people's comments, and you're going to be responsive to what it takes to make you a better you. And then finally, as my mentor of many years once told me, he says, "You are what you are becoming." And this is a total mindset thing where you're thinking about, who do I want to be? And you are that person that you want to be.
Wow, that is just so phenomenal. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was so inspiring and motivating to myself, and I'm going to have a good time. I love listening to the podcast when it's done editing and everything, and just taking it in. And I go back to some of my favorite episodes. This one definitely is one for me, because I am that entrepreneur that is working to create a model that works and is profitable, not just for me, but for employees, and just impacting lives all over the globe. And I pray that many people, I know that many of our viewers and listeners will benefit from this episode, Christopher. So Christopher, tell us, how do we get connected with you? Of course, we always put the links and everything from Christopher in the bio for his book, for his social media handles and things. But you tell us, how do you want us to connect with you, preferably?
Yeah, so the easiest way to connect to me is with LinkedIn. So almost everybody's on LinkedIn. So you can find my page on LinkedIn. And if you want to send me an email on LinkedIn, I don't look at it every day, but I do look at them. And so please do that. If you want to look at the website about the book, there is a website for the book, which is called www.thevalueequation.com. And on that website, there's some freebies that you can get to in terms of some charts and graphs that will help you as you're trying to make your business worth more than it costs, and trying to create some business wealth. And then beyond that, there'll end up being a personal website too, but that's a work in process. So that's going to be coming up. But if you want to find me and reach out to me and you want to do it through LinkedIn, I will find you.
Absolutely. And so this is not his last episode on Mindset Mastery Moments. We're definitely going to have him come back later on, and we'll delve a little bit more into the work he's doing, because he is on a trail path, as he said earlier, that he has shifted from, being all in the front line with his companies and things, to do this work and make sure that individuals learn how to set up successful businesses that work, so that they can have more value in the equation. And you guys heard his heart, Christopher. This is what I absolutely love when I met you, is that you want to see businesses built for the good of all. And so that's what you've done in your work. As I listened throughout, you sharing your thought process and how you were thinking. I hope that you all gathered from Christopher how successful people truly think along his journey. We out of time, but he'll be back, and you get to tap in more in the book and connect with him on LinkedIn. Christopher, it's just been such a pleasure to have you.
Alisa, it's been my pleasure to be here, and I couldn't be more excited to talk with you and your audience.
Awesome. Valuable insights, enlightening conversation. Here are all the strategies and the principles behind the value equation. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Dr. Alisa Whyte with my special guest, Christopher Volk. We pray that you have had a good round. Share, like, and subscribe. Get this over to an entrepreneur business leader that you know needs it. Buy the book and just use it as a tool. We'll see you later. Remember, everything begins with your thought. Love, light, peace, and blessing. Live passionately in purpose. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.